Hello everyone, welcome to another interesting Space Week video. So you may be wondering why am I talking this quietly, because as you can see I'm in my new house in one of my three rooms on the top floor, and it's literally 11:40 p.m. and everyone is sleeping except me right now because I'm filming a video, but I'll try to talk as as quietly as possible, so either I don't wake anyone up in the house or you can also hear it. So yeah, let's start the video. So in today's video we're going to be learning about how does the United States Space Shuttle's orbiter work. So I have the model here right now with me. So this is going to be our, I'm going to bring it closer to you. It's white because so the reflections is pretty bad. Now you can see it properly. Okay, so this is going to be our model dummy for today's video. So with the help of this model, I'm going to be explaining what are the main parts of the shuttle, how does it work, and even from the launch till the landing, I'm going to tell it to you. So first we need to start. So this is the space shuttle orbiter. It was called the orbiter vehicle, the space shuttle, or the spaceship. It has quite a number of names. So yeah, you can call it whatever you want. So before that, we need to take a look at its structure. It looks similar to an airplane but has a little bit different characteristics. The first we need to look at the wings. It features the delta wings like on the Concorde, just like the same delta wing, and these things you can see right here are control surfaces, and this is the vertical stabilizer with the rudder which acts as a brake. I'm going to explain it to you later. So now let's study the parts of the orbiter. There are, first we need to divide it because the fuselage obviously contains the most. So yeah, let's divide it. So it's just like the aircraft, like forward, mid, and aft fuselage. So yeah, let's see what it consists of. Forward fuselage consists of the cockpit where the crew sits, and it's also divided into separate sections. I'm going to tell it to you now. So to learn about each mission, we need to take a look at how many astronauts were present on each mission. So each mission usually consisted of 5 to 7 astronauts each. So on here the top there were actually two sections. One was the top deck and the one was the bottom deck, where most of the astronauts were. On the top deck there would be the commander, the pilot, and the helpers, mission specialist. So there would be four on the top deck and rest of them on the bottom deck. Which, because there would be no space on the top deck to accommodate the rest of them, they would be on the bottom deck with expandable chairs that could be put with seat belts to the launch position. Now let's see the windows. There are a total of 6 windows here, just like an aircraft, which give a magnificent view when the shuttle launches into space, which was one of the most iconic launches in American history. So yeah, but for unfortunately for the astronauts on the middle deck, or not so lucky as the astronauts who are sitting on the top deck, they won't get a magnificent view as they're ascending to space. They're going to be just surrounded by the walls of the shuttle, just like the four walls of this room, like how I'm facing, and I'm facing the camera. Okay, so now we have talked about the forward fuselage. The mid fuselage is where most of the complex instruments were, and that includes the payload bay, which is like the cargo hold in the aircraft, but it opens like this. I'm going to show it to you. So these are the doors. Imagine my let's just say this is the shuttle like this, and these are the doors. It opens like this. Great engineering, I would love to say. Love the engineering on this thing. So yeah, the mid fuselage consists only of the payload bay, and the aft fuselage consists of these wings, the three engines, the OMS rocket motors, more on that later, and then the vertical stabilizer. Okay, so now we have talked about the fuselage. Now let's talk about the propulsion which actually gets them into space, the astronauts. The space shuttle was launched with the help of two SRBs called solid rocket boosters, which were basically rockets with tons of solid fuel, which was hard fuel inside them, which would ignite and do most of the heavy lifting. For these three main engines to actually ignite and work, there was a separate tank which was called the external tank or the orange external tank, which I would love to say because it was orange in color. But that orange color was nothing to do with the mission, it was actually a protective covering to ensure that nothing happens to that fuel. And then that orange external tank fuel was fed to these main engines via pipes here. They would circulate in a kind of, like a spiral shape to cool down them and to not ignite and not to ignite any excess vapors. They would also act as coolants. So now we have talked about how these main engines get their fuel, but do they do the lifting? They do only 2% of the heavy lifting, but the 98% is done by the SRBs, the solid rocket boosters. So these give the additional 2% thrust, and once the SRBs are out, which means the space shuttle has reached its point where it can safely throttle itself to the outer space, which means not outer space but to the orbit. Yeah, the reason for that is solid rocket boosters do most of the heavy lifting because there are for two reasons. One, the whole weight of the spacecraft, which is called a space shuttle, which includes this orbiter, the orange external tank, and the two SRPs. But after they detach exactly 2 minutes and 30 seconds after launch, there will be a lot less fuel in the orange external tank, which will be enough power, which will give enough power for the space shuttle's three main engines to do the lifting to orbit on their own without the help of two extra rockets, which means weight will be reduced in layman's terms. Yeah. Then we have talked about how this works, and now let's talk about the OMS rocket motors. There is no OMS rocket motors on this thing, but these are additional smaller engines on the place where the engines are, they'll be on the side, and they either help to do the deorbit burn during the re-entry or they help us get into orbit once MECO stage occurs. MECO stands for main engine cut off. Yeah. So these gives that final propulsion towards the orbit, as you can say. So now we have talked about everything. Now let's talk about the important parts. So it's like a digital display with all sorts of things like indications, warnings. It shows like the engine pressure, the fuel consumption, the time, everything it shows. No problem in that. And then once MECO occurs, main engine cut off, then yeah, you give that last propulsion towards orbit, and then once you're in orbit, you either dock to the International Space Station, which was the final mission of the space shuttle, which was in 2011. So yeah, I'm sorry, the camera shaked a little bit. So before that, the space shuttle's launch took place from 1984 to yeah till 2011, the year which I was born, 2011. So now let's talk about the important things. I'm struggling quite a while because it's already becoming midnight and I don't know, like 9 minutes, and I'm already sleeping. Sorry, please don't mind. The thing is that with these videos I do only in the night time because it requires less work, but during the day I have other works to do like my holiday homeworks and studies, so it's gonna be a lot of things to manage at once which I've mastered at. So that's why I keep these videos to do in the night time. So yeah, let's keep that aside and let's do it. Okay. So this is, I'm really sorry, just please don't mind. Okay. So the front part consists of the cockpit where most of the things are operated from, like the OMS starting, like the guidance to the landing base, more on that later. But also the payload bay is a place where you can store cargo which can be flown into space, like a satellite which can be deployed at orbit, or repairs for the International Space Station, or cargo for the space station. So yeah, tons of them. Okay, so now the payload bay has several mirrors to let go of the heat. So that is one more advantage. And the payload bay consists of a robotic arm called the Canada arm, which was, like a gift to the space shuttle by the Canadian country. So it was written Canada with the flag, and it was operated kind of like an Airbus side stick, which was in the middle. You could see through the windows, two windows were there, and move the Canada, and you can either dock it to the satellite, and then once it's docked fully you can release the latches on that satellite, then you can pull it and position it into orbit, or you can even move an astronaut on it while doing spacewalks, EVAs. So yeah, now let's talk about the re-entry. The re-entry consists of the heat shield, which is this black bottom thing here, which consisted of more than 35,000 silica tiles, which had a great heat absorption capacity to absorb the heat into. So it consisted of 35,000 silica tiles, and once the re-entry, the atmospheric pressure would create a heat barrier which would cause fires like up to 1 kilometer away, which would literally burn the space shuttle and the crew inside. To prevent this, there would be the usage of heat shield. And once it came down, the landing gear would be deployed just like an airplane, and it would glide towards the runway, which was a 10,000 plus foot runway for the space shuttle to land. So yeah, all in all, this mission was a very successful one, which was called the STS, or the Space Transport System. So once on landing, there was a parachute which would deploy, and then the rudder you can see here would split into two like this. I'm going to show. So the rudder is like this. It would split into two, slowing down, and to control them, these fins would be used to control the angle of attack towards the ground, and the commander would be the one flying all of this, and the mission specialist would be calling the altitude. So I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and comment, and if you learned something new on the space shuttle, have a nice day as always, and bye bye.